My mother, a wonderful Irish Catholic lady. By God, she was a wonderful Irish Catholic lady. You ask her and she'd tell you. My mother was a courageous lady. My dad was wounded in the Second World War. He died at age 51, kind of unexpectedly. She carried the family forward. Matter of fact, she carried the family throughout all the years I can remember. She was really the breadwinner who made my dad feel like he was. She's a remarkable lady. And she was very active in her church. And she came home to my brother's house. I'll tell you two stories about my mom. And announced that she was going with the St. Barnabas Church Choir down in Madison, Wisconsin, on a European tour. And my brother called me and said, "Can you believe this? She can't sing." We went down there the following weekend to kind of plead with her not to do this. Because if you thought about my mother singing, it was, songs I learned at my mother's knee and other bad joints. I mean, she was awful. She'd kill dogs. How are you getting to do this? Well, they like me. What do you mean they like you? Can you sing? Well, kinda. What are you talking about, kind of? I mean, you're going on a tour to Europe. Well, your children taught me what to do. My grandkids taught me what to do. What's that? Well, my mother learned how to put on the hits. My mother lip-synced with the St. Barnabas Church Choir across Europe. And it's a true story. I don't make that up at all. My mother had the courage to say, "I can't sing, but I want to go." And she went on the journey. My mother traveled the world after my dad died. She climbed to the base camp of Mount McKinley. She worked in soup kitchens in the poor sections of Mexico as part of her church. She was in the Holy Land at least 5 times, and of those 5 times, 4 of the times, she had to be put in safe houses because people were shooting at one another. And the story goes that she would walk out on the streets anyhow because people needed to be smiled at. My mother was a wonderful woman of great courage. One of the stories about my mom, baptism and confirmation are really big if you're Irish Catholic. And our daughter was going to be confirmed. And my brother called from Madison and said, "I think Mom would like to come up a little bit early." I said, "Why would she?" "That's fine, but why does she want to come up early?" "Well, she needs to." "What do you mean she needs to, Jim?" "Well, she's in a little bit of trouble." I said, "She's 72. What kind of trouble could she get into?" "Well, remember when you were a high school principal?" I said, "What does that have to do with this?" He said, "Just listen." He said, "Remember when you were a high school principal and a kid got in trouble and you called their parents to come in and pick them up?" "Yeah, but what does this have to do with Mom?" He said, "Well, they called me in from the senior center. She's been expelled." I said, "She's been expelled? What's she been expelled for?" "For fighting." "Who was she fighting with?" "An 80-year-old lady." And I said, "Jim, are you making this up?" He said, "No, Fred." He said, "I wish I was. But she's been suspended for 3 weeks, and she can't." I said, "She's the treasurer of the senior center." "I know, all the more reason they want to get her out of there." Some lady walked up to my mom, and forgive the language, but it's a true story. And you got to understand, if you said anything bad at the table when I was a kid growing up, you'd get whacked. I mean, if my dad couldn't get you, she would. So this lady says to my mom, walks up to her at some doings and says, "Margaret, you're a slut." Well, that's the end of the day. "You take that back." "I will not take it back." "You take it back, I'm going to punch you in the nose." "I will not take that back." "I'm going to tell you one more time, you take that back." "You don't take that back, I'm going to punch you in the nose." "Go ahead." Pow! She whacks her one, knocks her cold as a cucumber, and breaks her nose. They had to haul this lady out. Guess what they were fighting over? An 82-year-old guy who was dating them both at the same time. So we joke and say, "Mom, you're still hot." It's the journey about where it's going to go tomorrow, guys. Mom was wonderful that way. Mom was wonderful that way. The other story I want to tell you about is my dad. My dad, I said, died at 51. Let me go back to when I was teaching high school, my first teaching job years ago. I was teaching school in a town I went to school in, the high school I went to school in. And it was November, like it is today. Snowy. Last week of football, I was a football coach. And they called me at the end of the day from the box that talks on the wall in all schools. Mr. Kusch, please come to the office. Your class will be covered. I just had some tests with my doctor, and when I got to the office, it said, your doctor needs to see you. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what's this about? Oh my goodness, what's this about? Across the street, oh my goodness, what's this about? I go into the office, and I talk with this doctor who I've known since a little kid. And he said, I don't know how to tell you this. Tell me what? What did the test show? He said, nothing to do with the test. I said, well, what do you... He said, I don't know how to tell you. I said, tell me. Please tell me. I've got to get back. I've got practice. He said, no, your practice is covered. I said, well, for goodness sake, tell me why you brought me over here. He said, Fred, I got to tell you, your dad just died. My dad died at age 51. My dad died at age 51. The Sunday before, the Wednesday he died, we were in his kitchen like we always were, because kitchen was a meeting place for my old man, discussing world events. And if you can remember back to 1971, the war in Vietnam was still an issue. The movie The Graduate was out, and my dad was a World War II vet with experience both in the South Pacific as well as on D-Day. That trash, you're unpatriotic. We went back and forth about the trash of Dustin Hoffman and Mrs. Robinson and the war in Vietnam being right and wrong. And my dad he wore his emotions on his sleeve, so the volume would pick up. It was never nasty, but it was just, you got the passion going. And finally, like it was in every one of these discussions, when he'd had enough, he'd go, that's it, you're upsetting your mother, get out of here. And she'd shake her head and go like this. My grandmother said, there's no such thing as a bad experience unless you're too stupid to learn something from it. Now, if you can imagine, my father was an iron worker. My dad was about 6'1". He's a huge man, strong man, kind of a gorilla of a man. And at the time, I was still 6'10", but I weighed a bit less. But when you came around my father and you were his son or his daughter and you hadn't seen him for a while, you got a hug and you got a kiss. And I thought to myself, no more hugs and kisses because my dad's not here anymore. All three of my children really didn't know their grandpa. The only one who ever was touched by their grandpa was the oldest one, and that was for 3-4 months. And so after they grew a bit, they always would ask me, tell me grandpa stories, Dad. Tell me what grandpa was always like. Tell me what you learned from grandpa. And one of the favorite stories was, leave it all in the classroom. Leave it all in the field. Always give it your best. Don't ever get a case of the what-ifs, the could-bes, the should-bes. Leave it all there. Do your absolute best. And the kids were ingrained with that sort of thing. The other thing they were ingrained with is any time I left them to do the things like I'm doing today when they were little, I'd give them a hug and a kiss. And that was okay until they were in junior high. Don't touch me. At least don't touch me in front of my friends. And so there's an alleyway when they got to high school to get to Central High School in La Crosse behind Quillen's grocery store. If you didn't give them a hug and a kiss behind the grocery store, they wondered what was wrong. And today, when you go into a restaurant, we're going to see them this afternoon and tomorrow. We'll greet one another with a hug and a kiss. And that's the story of my dad. My dad is there. My kids have learned you never leave it anywhere but in the office, on the field, in the relationship. You always give it your best. I heard my son with the oldest granddaughter telling Olivia, you got to give it your best, Olivia. You got to leave it all in the classroom.